Now, depending on what price you get Oceanic Mythology by Paul Hamlyn for, the photographs of the artifacts are, make the whole thing worthwhile enough. And we can interpret some of these things. Like we can see something by the Murunbata people with the snakes representing the magical circle. The Wanjina being, and some of the other entities talked about being clearly the jinn. Now, why would the Marquesans can be said to be a people who, they have a wheel with 6, but they have a double end thing. So it's sort of their like phoenix sort of thing. The Easter Island statues can be said to be idealized. Individuals. The Mara guardian statue from the Ravava Austral Islands can be said to be just how important the role of the guard of the ritual, of the guard of the temple. And the Marquesas Islands versus the Easter Islands can be said to have different ideals. Although for a male and a female, that can be different in different cultures. Like the Eastern Island thin man with his hands at his sides and all that. But the woman, it's up at the hips and she's, thick and more shapely. So that doesn't have to be any difference there. In Hawaii, they had wooden images that could warn you about the Heiau, or sacred precincts. While Taringa Nui can represent how a person identifies with the fish and seafood or whatnot before, one goes hunting, or as one goes hunting. So it's not just we're superior, we have control. That's not what's going on. And we have, like the talking stick. So the talking stick motif of the Maori and some others you could see can relate to how, ritual acts are supposed to be sanctioned by the entity whose mark it is. The Kohau Wangarongo Eastern Island tablets might not be a mnemonic device. In some ways, it reminds you of some sort of Dravidian script or something, doesn't it? But contrary to popular belief, religion kind of comes first and then certain technology to record it and that sort of thing. From the Society Islands, you have kind of like the jet pillars with the different, layer, kind of like a screw, but not a screw. But that motif has been found there. The Marquesas Islands again has an entity on a canoe, but the entity is almost like alien. So and it kind of the canoe in a way sort of reminds you of a turtle. So would they, when they say the animals taught them stuff, the animals did teach people stuff because people watched. You could have ritual smoking implements, invoking certain entities by the use of their their involvement by symbol or image, you could say. Remember that some of these stories are that life was given to the graven image. Now, in the Islamic vision, people, the graven images they had, the idea was that the graven images, if a person, now writing was something different, but if a person is like represent, that sort of, or even like what people say about the tarot or that sort of thing, because it's really a language thing. But are you able to bring life into it? And obviously, pretty much the answer is not. So the Tatuki in the Cook Archipelago, like the other, it's an ancestor figure, but this guy has like I don't want to say beer belly. He's sort of like the Maori. He's ritual scarification and tattooing all over the place. And from Eastern Island, there's an interesting sort of guy with his hands out like, and so some guy, so the guy's resting, so it represents the rest, but a person's like on guard. And above the doors, the Maori, the tongue hanging out can kind of show a fearless sort of thing. Some people think of them as owls. And there's the idea of some owl god being sacrificed and placed under a back wall of a house. So putting that in the front, and okay, that makes sense. And the flight pattern, well, I don't, because a lot of the predatory animals kind of go in circles. Rongo's sort of an average sort of standing guy, his legs and arms apart. But depicted naked, the breadfruit, so other, an entity regarding harvest and display, so the rainbow. And there's an adze associated with Tang from the island of Mangaia. So craftsman entities being related to that. We have the ironwood image. In some African cultures, the iron figure, well, this kind of makes you think maybe they made masks out of iron and that sort of stuff. And the bindings, so we're obviously referring to it, and the ridiculous sort of exaggeration of the hips, or upper thighs or something. But oh wait, no, that's no, it's, well, that's why it's not filled in, I guess, because that's the male figure. but the on the chest and the arms, and between the arms there's a binding. So the male is the figure of technology and rules and such, and that right there is just he is the drive to protect his young. And canoes and stuff like that, just like in the Teutonic, particularly the Norse tradition, they would decorate, carving and otherwise. Oh, and the iron figure with the three suns is called Te Rongo. But again, remember the myths are about us. So we talk about the sacred land, whether it's completely or by extensions. And certain entities were supposed to teach us how to carve wood. I get implication that some of these were like birds and other animals. Tangaroa was supposed to be sort of an aloof sort of entity like Indra, but definitely involving itself and connecting with the human beings in terms of the, what's supposed to come from heaven, the proliferation and the maybe the, the storm and the creation and that sort of thing. And sometimes, like some of those drawings in India, you have so many figures represented in its body that it's evident that, just a human being reacts with everything, right? And so we really are referencing everything that in that respect. But in some mythologies, the entity is not considered a god. It's like a demiurge. Well, I mean, it's not the creator god, it's the demiurge. So it's like it works with whatever. But in others, as I'm saying, monotheism, polytheism, different placements of different roles in the hierarchy, that kind of varies. And the building material, the armor, the feathers were not just like some symbol of flight or something. It was like symbol of bravery, I guess. I mean, if you had a bunch of feathers versus some other, maybe you were a better fighter. I'm not sure how that kind of, but dog's teeth, just like other animals that would be considered unclean in some religions, can be used to have a more fearsome effect, you could say. And not all images were like the gods themselves, although if people worship charms and amulets, they think they have power rather than like a talisman that completes a ritual. But then again, if it's a linguistic device, how can we say that the ku, ka'ili, moku are some other entities weren't as such? And some of them may have been just nice decoration, nice playthings for the children that were kind of took a while. I mean, human hair is somewhat easy to come across, but it still has to be grown, so there's definitely a limited thing. Captain Cook collected feathers throughout Polynesia. But the different types of feathers for those people, and were Micronesia is next, and then Melanesia, and then Australia, of course, is what we're going to go into. Sharks and their teeth can represent the sacrificial element. We have jade and some other special stones. As I'm saying, we have the different roles of the animals that they come across. Certain things that a person may have to do may be done on a ritual schedule, so there can be combs. And like a gargoyle in Hawaii, they would have in corners of houses and stuff, not outside, but inside, some sort of like, entities. But they would use fish teeth. So maybe dog teeth inspire fear from the outside, but fear from the inside is fish teeth. That could be the case. Some of these so-called gods that are represented on the entity, now birds makes more sense, and you more likely associated bird. But when you do see the entities, either it's minimized, it's like not part of it at all, but very commonly the genitals are the male, female specific forms are represented. Just like the puja in India, we have not only the making of the objects makes it what they are, makes it what we are, but that has to be done in a particular way. So there's traditions about those things. Drums, obviously, as sacred instruments, and often, I mean, more often than other things, given graven images. Because remember that not only do these entities like hymns and whatnot, but a lot of the males and females that people consider to be gods are things that they project as that, like, musical instruments to be played as part of their ceremonies and such. So flutes, different things. If there is a drug available in the area, that's usually through a ritual element, because obviously the change in the consciousness was associated with the entities. The bird cult, the eggs of the birds obviously had value, but what that represented, the hero feats of the young men, that was an important thing. And the difficulty of getting it was this piece of sympathetic magic to increase the availability of food. And the roles of family, resting, multiple facets of one's personality. The fact that some of these things mark or describe what was done in the past with people's remains is an interesting thing to find. So you very often around these sacred artifacts, you find human remains somewhere, although a lot of that may not be remembered. They may remember some story of some hero who died such and such place, which the fact that I don't perform certain rituals in the graveyard and that sort of stuff, my more common ritual prayers and that sort of thing. Doesn't mean that these are areas devoid of one's spiritual practice. If you have a kite, combining the kite with human features, some of it's in reference to Tauhaki of the Maoris and some other sorts of myths like that, where the human, went about the heavens, was given this ability. And humans are given roles where they represent or an act with their rattles or whatever, the elements of the myth, if not the straight up characters. And some of the entities are there. Some of them are said to have been summoned. Some of them are summoned by the, some of them are summoned by the, by the rites, by the making of the images. The people of Micronesia seem to have conveyed stuff about navigation in the seas and the general patterns of the winds in their mythology. Some of the cradle and that sort of stuff that people do is more associated with sorcery than conveying information. But we do find out that some of that is accurate via that. And currency varied, pigs, what went on with your pigs, like how big did their teeth grow and that sort of stuff, what sort of stones you have, and maybe there's a particular person who makes a certain style, certain foods or certain stones are only available from these people, so they have their value like that. Now the ancient alien theorists and stuff are gonna, it's like, but they're riding a whale, so that must mean that it's a spaceship, and but other aspects of that. But the Malangan in particular did that sort of thing. Their ships could be represented in a way that it's not, quite a canoe, but it's like some sort of animal, like but again, we have this aspect of sympathetic magic, that you made models of stuff that did happen or will happen, or you want to happen, that sort of thing. And the energies you want involved in your food can result in your the style patterns that you use. Certain orders are said to have been founded by the spirits, and differences in the differences in the mythology or the material, obviously that happens with environment. The Rig Veda has the swan maiden thing, the girl loses her wings and remains on Earth as the wife of the captor. And the Celts, I represent this on the cups or cauldrons things, and you could say that talks about the rarity. So rather than one that's trapped, in that case you're talking about somebody who's wooed over. And materials from elsewhere, like ivory, can said to have certain importances. And of course, there's mythical ancestors like Na Kavandra. And there's myths about some of the items that would be carved and brought to life. You have to put certain substances on it, like sago milk or whatever. So now, for some, the wicker work would be the ceremonial thing, and the Ka Ea Emuni, the Va Emuru, say that the Ka Ea Emunu were given the hero. So the hero takes charge of the unseen entities. You do have some of that. People the Massim and Trabianders believe that people emerged from the earth, and the snakes and other animals become the relatives. And some areas, they had multi-year cycles, like the Hevehe of the Elama. And that can be represented as the combining of certain features. Some of the entities that people worship or interact with are ones that it's like they don't want you to be reliant. And a lot of the truths about, now some of the ogres could be dangers in the community that people just don't want to admit that are possible. Far less common, I would think, than other things, but the Dengai had different forms, serpent and rock and that sort of thing. But the child is the one who kills the ogre, representing like the child stage. You hit puberty, you have independent morality and the ability to choose, right? So whatever the issue was with the elder generation in terms of their ethics, well, that's, that's on you. And so the earth becoming vegetable, the trumpet, that you have a life after death, and things are going to happen with that. And there's power associated with the dead, associated with offerings of that sort. So you do have a, and the ogres and monsters of the sea, like the Adaro and some other things, there's a difference with that. Ones that are associated with warfare and other things. And you had stylized boards. I guess you wouldn't write on them like a thick piece of paper. But some of the it could have been just some things could have been just doll figures. Now I wonder about the patterns, the jagged and the circle, and it's like the belly button is the sun, or and then we have the moon. So in the center of the body, we have the sun and the moon for the eyes, and that could be possible meaning associated with that. It's difficult for a lot of these native cultures, or even a lot of what's associated with even Christianity and stuff, to get the people who actually know the rituals and can pass on the rituals. It's like it used to be a lot of extra gospels and stuff like this were like included. The lawn bull, there were initiatic societies that had, sometimes they cut you or burn you or tattoo you or circumcise you or subincise you or whatever. It's all part of the process. Of course, the circumcision and subcision is more associated with Australia. But obviously that was a part of the body that a person could still use, and it could be mutilated to a degree. So that was probably why that arose. I mean, there is a rare health condition, but that doesn't really seem to factor into the mythology, really. We have myths of the protecting of women. Maybe the sky entities or the earth entities kind of want to go a little further than they, can. And sometimes it's not per se what are called gods or goddesses, but the animals. So sympathetic magic regarding them, maybe particular tools and masks to wear. That could be Agiba boards that can kind of summarize a particular myth or even a whole system. The different parts of a sacred building. Now, the cover art that we see on this red picture here, we see bigger size and a little better detail here, but interestingly enough, Z is more common in demon names and stuff like this than other sounds are. And it ends with the B, but I don't think that has anything to do with anything other than the style. I don't think it's associated with the sound. Just as a Latin letter reader, that's kind of what we get, is Z's, N's, and V's, and the careful regard of the dead and their remains has an effect on what's going to happen to them, you say. That's so the funeral, yes, counting for the dead, but is thought of as more essential in some cultures versus others. People dance to get into trances. So you might want to have different types of animals that you have there. Oh, this is more of a land one. This is more of a water one. And maybe this is an air one. Maybe we're going to combine all these three into one. Some of it could be associated with fertility, some of it with hunting, whatever. There's certain forces like storms, tides, blooms of various bacteria, that sort of thing, that people would worry about. And you'd have these things represented in, and perhaps they'd hang up extra food. And special care of knot work and certain symbols, or perhaps even certain shapes of tools would be reserved for their use in ceremonies. Now, it doesn't seem that, although you do have sacred calendars, it doesn't seem that the sacred year per se is as essential to the thing. Perhaps that's just not how it's presented. But snakes are associated with the processing of materials. So that's symbolism. And of course, we end with the Australians and the dream time and tens of thousands of years of information being passed on. Oh, this happened and it's part of the dream time. So they interact this myth of the flood that happened at this period that you know, and being the people of the land, amongst this, that becomes the, you know, what makes the most sense, that some of these things became more, survived better. Certain planting, and, you know, because a 500-year storm or a 1,000-year storm could wipe out an island culture, but it might not wipe out a land culture. Enough of the land, you know, so you have Uluru Mountain, that orangish sort of hill was said to be covered by sand. Now, I don't know if that's been verified, how accurate that statement is. And certain, like the reemergence of the Morokulu Liwan image and some other things have been restored by the scientists, and perhaps there's stuff that tradition has left. Some ceremonies were multiple days. You had various tribes, so their taboos could vary. Their myths about their local ground could vary. Their relationship with the spirits could vary. But more than the other areas, the Australian kind of merges into one group. And a person might even say it happens better than in India. And again, you have this making of thing. Certain patterns of lines and stuff can represent the visionary state, but it can also represent different things that they're marking out. So I think a lot of work needs to be done in that respect to unveil some of the mysteries that could very well be more than just thing. And there's pointing sticks and wonderful curses, well, not wonderful curses, but some powerful curses of bone pointing and all that sort of stuff, using human hair, and oh, if you got a human bone, and well, that's usually illegal to acquire human bones, but the Wanjina, just like in Egypt, sometimes they're associated with snake entities, or there's a top entity that has its snake form. Lightning and other things might be said to help bring about the state. So it's not just certain things that the animals do or the plants do or even some drug does or the people do. There are certain states in nature, certain states in regards to one's life where certain things become more common. The rainbow snake myths, a person could say, well, the rainbow snake or the rainbow serpent, that's our auras. There's certainly some truth to that, but there are also entities and forces of nature, fields around the earth that are represented by these snakes, you could say. And animals that exist in the physical world, there's a little bit of specificness when it comes to the dream time associations. And it's made clear that the Wanjina, and even the top entities of that sort, the males and females that are treated as goddesses and gods, they are entities that, you know, male and female. Now, they may be beyond male and female in the worldly sense, but still. And different colors and different patterns can represent different stuff. You have dots that could be the faces of the sea foam or the energy fields or the power, or but you see the colorings and the patterns. There's stuff that happens. with that when you're talking about different subjects. And the images do relate to certain practices. It's not just people are just referring to the myths in sort of a Christian way, that these are things that happen. Let's thank God that they happened. The Wabalog, or the Wawalak sisters, and divine incest, or you know, myths about menstruation. Not only show a dynamic role of responding to the situations, but there are things about the people involved. Now, there's a lot of talk about aliens and all that stuff with the Wanjina and other and sacred garment wearing individuals. But just like the chi spots and the auras and all that other sort of stuff, you find more of that stuff being available to be found. We have why people died. And obviously people weren't, you have primal murders and sorts of stuff. We have sex symbolized in other aspects of nature, sort of preparing children before they get to that point of the ethics and stuff involved in dealing between the sexes. Why certain constellations are the way they are, and how we're guided to our destination. It's not that we just, whatever we want to be our afterlife is going to be our afterlife. The Aborigines, pretty much anywhere, didn't believe that. So, and let me try to sum up here with the what are we to do? That's sort of a different way of talking about the book, but it was a way of talking about the book based on its images. The different features of intellect and body and how they respond to a particular environment and what the environment is, the effects on mythology of that's obvious. Myths are an involvement of meaning, an involvement of use. It doesn't mean it's not true. And sometimes they are symbolically not, they are not true in one sense, but they're true in another sense, through that meaning that they reference a truth. And how we blend these different styles, it's up to us. But it should be about what's best, not just what we like. It should be about what's best, what seems to be the truest. Let's be flexible.